My name is Natalie Wynn. I'm 30 years old. I believe in taking care of myself, in a balanced diet, and a rigorous exercise routine. In the morning, if my face is a little puffy, I mix dermalogical exfoliant with a cleansing gel and massage it into my face. Then a toner and expensive Korean yeast. There is an idea of a ContraPoints, some kind of abstraction, but there is no real me. Only an entity, something illusory. And though I can hide my cold gaze, and you can shake my hand and feel flesh gripping yours, and maybe you can even sense our lifestyles are probably comparable, I simply am not there. Who is ContraPoints? She has been described by publications such as The New Yorker and The Verge as the stylish socialist who is trying to save YouTube from alt-right domination, and the Oscar Wilde of YouTube fighting the alt-right with decadence and seduction, among many other over-the-top descriptions. With over 600,000 YouTube subscribers and a breathtaking 9,500 supporters on Patreon, Natalie Wynn has carved out an incredibly successful niche in the political and philosophical side of YouTube. However, the story of ContraPoints you've been told is one of misconceptions, and sometimes outright deception. It's the story of a YouTube career that spans more than a decade. I think the best place to start this video is in the beginning, because there are a lot of misconceptions about Contra's origins on YouTube. If you read the fluff pieces written about Contra in publications like The Verge, you may get the impression that she is a recent arrival on YouTube. That article in particular cites Natalie's earliest days on YouTube alongside her debate with Blair White, which is hilariously inaccurate. Even her Wikipedia page isn't without its faults. It says that Wynn started creating videos on YouTube in 2008, initially publishing videos about atheism, which is close, but then goes on to say that, in 2016, she began the ContraPoints YouTube channel in reaction to the Gamergate controversy and the expansion and prevalence of right-wing YouTubers, shifting her content to countering their arguments. This is categorically untrue. On November 3rd of 2008, Natalie started the YouTube channel Nicotine 2. From early captures you can see that this channel offered pretty standard content for an atheist YouTuber at the time, like Islam, Reform, or Get Out. I realize a lot of you weren't around during the heyday of atheism versus creationism debates, and they aren't really a thing on YouTube anymore. This is partly as Contra said in the video, feminism did not destroy atheism because it was a trend that people eventually grew bored with. However, Contra ignores the fact that there was a pretty big schism that occurred towards the end of that era, and while it wasn't caused by feminism, it was about feminism, particularly an event that happened in an elevator and the advent of the so-called Atheism Plus movement, which was an attempt by progressive atheists to address issues of racism, homophobia, etc., in addition to skepticism and atheism. Additionally, atheism on YouTube was not solely about
a bunch of nerdy, socially awkward white men, like your humble narrator.
Ironically, the atheism sphere was a hell of a lot more diverse than BreadTube, which really is just a bunch of white men and one trans woman. BreadTube is appropriate because these people look like a Wonder Bread truck crashed into a mayonnaise factory. Seriously, how do you get so pale? Are you all wearing Deacon Frost sunscreen? While a lot of the most popular atheist channels were run by white men, there were channels run by bisexuals, women of color, goths, lunatics, and more. It's arguable that this period of time was the genesis of the modern social justice movement, as well as the anti-social justice movement. It's no surprise that many of the biggest skeptics and anti-social justice channels on YouTube were either major players of the atheism era or heavily inspired by it. Contra was actually one of the YouTubers who was questioning feminism around the time of the schism, but you wouldn't know that because she deleted those videos. I think it's also worth noting that the Nicotine 2 channel itself was initially suspended because Natalie trolled a radical feminist by sending her a video of tickle porn. When the Nicotine 2 channel was suspended in 2011, Natalie moved to the ContraPoints channel and continued making similar content until eventually taking a break from YouTube. The reason I think all of this is worth mentioning is because Natalie was a noteworthy YouTuber even before the ContraPoints channel. Some people still remember Nicotine too because of Natalie's reputation for being a pseudo-intellectual narcissistic alcoholic who craved attention and did shocking things on blog TV. Without the Wayback Machine, very few people would know this because Contra memory holed all the old videos when she staged a comeback in 2016. Personally, I think it's understandable to want to remove your old content, especially if you were a teen or young adult at the time you made them. We all make mistakes, we all do embarrassing things we later regret. It's part of life. A lot of people will let past mistakes slide if they can tell you've made an effort to learn and change. But that isn't what we see with Natalie. Instead, she has been trying to scrub the internet clean of any material that makes her look bad, and doing it under the guise that her old videos give her crippling dysphoria. Now, I have a few issues with this idea. The first is that Contra's dysphoria is oddly inconsistent. She had no problem bragging about what an educated, well-spoken, sexy man she used to be. From 17 onwards, she was irresistible to the ladies, and didn't even need to try. This is just one example of Contra reminiscing about what a poon-slaying Adonis she was before her transition. So I just find it a little hard to believe that someone who regularly talks about her previous life as a man would be filled with so much dysphoria that she would have to take down her entire catalog of old videos. Even if her dysphoria was that bad, why go through all the effort of copyright striking mirrors of old videos on other channels? Why did she also delete streams she has done after she started transitioning? Like the one she did with Milo Stewart, the one that was uploaded on both of their channels and then later deleted. Not just unlisted like Contra usually does, but deleted from 2 channels. I've seen a lot of allegations about what happened during the stream, but I'm only going to comment on one. That is the allegation that in her stream with Milo, Contra admitted that she was not diagnosed with gender dysphoria and started her transition by purchasing hormones online. The reason I entertain this allegation is because Contra stated in her autogynephilia video that she started her transition by purchasing hormones from the Republic of Vanuatu and then got hormones from an informed consent clinic.
I've always looked a little bit younger than my age, but last year I also started noticing the first signs that I was going to age into the body of an older man, and that triggered really intense gender dysphoria. At the same time, I realized that I would have to transition to have any hope of a genuinely fulfilling sex life. And at that point, the need to transition felt so urgent that I could not wait. So I got internet hormones from the Republic of Vanuatu, and I started taking those in August until I could get a prescription from an informed consent clinic. And since then, my life has drastically changed.
One of the more worrisome facets to this story is that, as far as I know, Contra has never stated that she was officially diagnosed with gender dysphoria. What worries me about this is that Contra is one of the biggest and most influential trans YouTubers. She undoubtedly has a lot of young and impressionable viewers who could be questioning their gender or sexuality. Maybe both. I look back on the way the YouTubers or comedians I watched as a teenager shaped my identity, and I know there are going to be kids who watch Contra's videos and want to be like her. I'm not trying to fearmonger, or say that Contra is leading kids into transitioning. I'm not even one of those people who is opposed to kids transitioning, but I think it is something that needs to be treated with incredible care, because these are irreversible changes. What we are seeing today are a lot of kids and young adults who are questioning their gender and running into pressure to transition.
You also have to think about, like, when I post a photo of myself, wearing fishnets or with my hair down, and then I get tons of comments on my Instagram, and they're just like, yes, you look so great as a girl, like, oh my god, transition, go transgender, like, you would fucking kill it, as if it's like a fucking sport, like, like you'd fucking kill it at being a transgender.
Is Contra responsible for confused kids transitioning? No, but I think she is complicit in an ethically questionable movement. She's supportive of organizations like Mermaids, and she's taken a stance against trans medicalism and medical gatekeeping in general, even though she used to think that doctors would prevent children who weren't trans from transitioning because it was trendy.
I think it is abusive. So no, I don't think it's hyperbolic for me to say that's abusive. I think allowing a kid to make that type of decision is abusive.
Okay, one, you said a while ago that you think that you're very concerned about all these kids showing up because of this trendy idea of what it is to be trans. Why is that a concern if there are medical gatekeepers in place who are able to distinguish between people who are doing it as
You know
part of
why?
a trend?
Because in large part, the science.
Blair, just let him finish. It's his
I
turn.
thought he was done. Sorry.
Why again? If the medical professionals are able to distinguish it, there's no danger of people going on hormones when they shouldn't be on hormones, or at least the danger is not a huge part of what's a huge part of this. The trenders will be distinguished.
But they won't. They won't, though.
Furthermore, she is giving her viewers a false impression of her life by editing so much of her past, in what seems to be an attempt to keep it vague and uncertain, if not misleading, as was the case with her gender dysphoria video, which features scenes that take place in the Beverly Mantle Gender Clinic, giving the impression of some kind of medical atmosphere. I can't say for certain that Contra has never been diagnosed with gender dysphoria, but in her May 2019 Patreon stream, she stated that she had only just scheduled an appointment with a therapist. If Contra is only just recently starting to go to therapy, how likely do you think it is that she met with a psychiatrist to get diagnosed with GD? Especially given that she mentioned in her I Am Genderqueer video that she thought about transitioning in the past, but avoided it because it would mean going to see a psychiatrist.
I have thought about HRT to get that sweet, smooth estrogen skin and some alleged emotional benefits, but it involves a lot of doctors and therapists, and it's not really my scene.
Why would she be uncomfortable with seeing a psychiatrist? Well, as she explained in Psychiatry, Contra was diagnosed with ADD at the age of 8.
See, if you have middle-class parents like I do, then bad grades are considered the symptom of some kind of medical condition, at least when it happens to your fucking kid. So they took me to a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with attention deficit disorder and prescribed Adderall, a drug whose effects turn out to be basically the same as high-grade crystal meth. Now, I took this drug for no more than 2 weeks. The problem was, once that shit wears off, you sink into a pit of fury and despair, which I had no way of coping with at the time. The thing about uppers is, you feel great when you're on them, but when you come down hard. And that is a heavy load to place on the back of an 8-year-old with no experience taking mind-altering chemicals.
What followed was a period of almost 2 decades, where she was diagnosed at different times with OCD, depression, bipolar disorder, and anxiety, for which she was prescribed a variety of psychiatric drugs. In college, Contra started drowning her mental health issues with alcohol and has been off psychiatric drugs since 2014. As an aside, this is also the same video where Contra implies her mom molested her.
This is where mommy used to touch me. Not all mommies are good mommies.
It could be a joke, I guess, but hey, have you guys ever noticed the amount of mother imagery Contra uses in her videos?
Hello, children.
I don't know, just a thing I noticed. I want to make it really clear that I don't think being trans is a mental illness, but, ooh, that was a scary but, Contra is someone with a long history of mental illness. She spent almost 20 years on some kind of psychiatric medication before quitting cold turkey. Now she self-medicates with booze and titty skittles she may have gotten without a medical diagnosis. And to be honest, I don't have a problem with that. It's her body. As another alcoholic once said, your body is your private property. If nothing else, you own your own meat. I think people should be able to do whatever they want if it makes them happy. Contra seems really unhappy, though. She says her dysphoria is only getting worse over time, and she has talked about being stuck in a doom spiral. She's less than 2 years into her transition, but she has already had facial feminization surgery, which she admits didn't make her feel any better.
I've been kind of depressed this past month, and I think part of it is that on a subconscious level, I think I was hoping that surgery would completely change my self-image and make me like myself. But it really hasn't. I mean, I'm happy with the results, I'd do it all again, but I still feel the way I felt before.
Despite the financial cost, pain, and potential side effects, she really doesn't look much different to me. If anything, I'd say the surgery aged her a solid 5 or 10 years. On top of all of that, the surgery may have accidentally paralyzed her face to some degree. I don't see any of this getting better either. With the support of her fan base and the ridiculous amount of money she's making from Patreon, it probably won't be very long before she has bottom surgery, and that is where shit will go south in a hurry. We're talking about somebody who had to be held and comforted after reading the gender critical subreddit. If she thought facial feminization was terrifying, I don't know how she's going to deal with a vaginoplasty. I'll also remind you that this is someone who has talked about having self-harming tendencies in the past. There is the drinking, of course, but I can't really judge anyone for that. What makes me nervous is Contra's admitted history of digital self-harm, which she talked about in her Incels video. Natalie has talked about spending hour after hour seeking out the meanest and most brutal posts about her on the internet, and has at times displayed a bit of a codependent relationship with certain sites, such as when she gave a shout out to Kiwi Farms in her autogynephilia video.
Your Honor, I'd like to admit into evidence the following photograph. That's me at E Street Cinema in 2014. This one's on the house, Kiwi Farms.
In her Incels video, Natalie did say that she had stopped visiting those kinds of sites, and even advocated that other people learn how to block negative websites on their computers, but there is some reason to believe she was fibbing. One way we can deduce this is based upon the number of her videos that coincidentally happened to get deleted shortly after their link on negative websites. The situation is so transparent that Contra reading along has become a running joke among the people who post about her. To give Contra the benefit of doubt, I suppose it is possible that she has a bunch of little birdies who report back to her whenever a dastardly Kiwi Farms poster documents one of her lies or hypocrisies. But there is one example that makes me think Contra is still reading along. It was a pretty hilarious incident that occurred when she posted a picture of herself at DragCon. A Kiwi Farms poster pointed out that Contra had cellulite. Contra then tweeted that she had cellulite on Twitter. This in and of itself wouldn't indicate that she had been reading Kiwi Farms until her tweet was posted on the Kiwi Farms thread, at which point, probably realizing she had been caught with her hand in the cookie jar, Contra deleted the tweet, but not before it was archived. Don't get me wrong. I think it must be terrifying to have your every move tracked by a bunch of turbo autists. But what kind of self-obsessed jerk follows hate threads devoted to them? Kiwi Farms is probably only the tip of the iceberg. I have no doubt Contra is reading all of the hate threads on the gender-critical subreddit, and God knows how many image boards. A lot of TERFs and anti-trans people are pretty quick to label Contra an autogynephile or a trans trender. She certainly fits the description in many ways, especially in terms of the self-obsession and the way she rushed into the more extreme aspects of transitioning. There is also the evidence that she used to watch trans porn in the Blog TV days, and said that her cross-dressing habit began with one of her ex-girlfriends sissifying and feminizing her.
It was around then that I first cross-dressed, when a woman I was seeing asked if she could dress me up in her clothes and do my makeup. God, yes, I said.
Contra also has some odd views about what it means to be a woman. She used to imply that womanhood was about identity, but in the aesthetic, she makes the case that identity is meaningless unless you live as a woman.
What matters is that we identify as women. We can express that identity in different ways, but it's the identity, not the performance, that makes us women. But you can't be a woman without performing womanhood. Without action and without social recognition, the identity is meaningless. If womanhood is nothing to you but a private daydream, then you may as well do what those assholes say and identify as a helicopter, because unless you're living womanhood, the identity is literally that meaningless. Well, where does your idea of womanhood even come from then? Das ewig Weibliche, the archetype of the eternal feminine.
The problem with Contra's feminine archetype is that it is really fucking stupid.
But trans women have to overdo it. You need to be so good at makeup that every cis woman you know comes to you for advice. You need to toss your hair and cross your legs. You need to smile even at people who hate you. Eliminate every aggressive impulse. You must be a blossom floating along the surface of a stream. Your hands are not tools. They are ornaments at the ends of your arms.
Which seems like an eerily euphemistic version of something Blair White said.
So I think you have a few misconceptions about my views on transgenderism. I think that when I say that you are, assuming the characteristics of a woman, I don't mean that you are an impersonator, like you're a clown, like you're an act in that sense. I mean that when you undergo hormone therapy, when you consume synthetic hormones, when you undergo surgeries to alter your bones, or you implant something in yourself to attain a body feature that is biologically impossible otherwise, that is imitating body parts that are biologically impossible for you. So for me, it's more of a stepping outside of myself, being able to concede the fact that, of course, I am biologically male, but in the pursuit of my own happiness, I choose to transition to assume characteristics that are not natural for me.
My clothes, makeup, voice, none of this makes me a woman. No trans woman thinks that femininity and womanhood are the same. Rather, we're using a cultural language of feminine signifiers to prompt others to see us for what we are. Sometimes I get the impression that my cis girlfriends don't really understand why I'm presenting in such a meticulously feminine way. Like, they think I'm wearing ombre lips at 11 a.m. because I'm playing some kind of clout game, which I am, but also, if one person calls me sir, that's gonna ruin my day. So I'm desperately throwing glitter spaghetti at the wall in hopes the light catches some glimmer of womanhood.
Of course, Contra would never outright say that you need to look like a Sandra Lee tablescape to be a woman. Otherwise, the baseball bat-wielding Marxist transgender cat girls would be coming for her knees. So, she'll appease her base by saying she thinks it's possible for a hairy top who doesn't take hormones to be considered a woman. However, when she talks about the qualities that epitomize femininity, or the moments in her life that make her feel like a woman, they are absurdly stereotypical, and, dare I say, misogynist.
I guess there are certain moments that make me feel like a natural woman. Oh, listening to Aretha Franklin, the pain and ecstasy of penetration, waiting in a long-ass line for the restroom, a big strong arm around my waist, being asked if I have any tampons, having tampons in case someone asks, a dude explaining philosophy 101 to me and me going, oh really? Wow.
Contra also frequently refers to herself with the drag slang term, fish.
Well, I am serving up fishy realness, so granted. I'm so sorry you can't handle that I'm natural fish. I'm ahi tuna and you're mackerel sweaty. Take a fucking sip, babes.
I love that.
Which is curious for two reasons. Fish is a term drag queens use to describe particularly feminine drag queens who can pass as a woman. By itself, the term is offensive to cis women because drag is kind of misogynist. It is men, mostly, emulating a usually over-the-top stereotype of a woman. It's basically a minstrel show. A menstrual show, if you will.
P.U.
More curious to me is why Contra would ever refer to herself as fish to begin with. I know she loves drag. Where do you think she gets all her ideas for costumes? But it just doesn't make any sense to me. Trans women have spent decades fighting against the idea that they're drag queens. Why Contra would embrace drag and essentially call herself a female impersonator is bizarre, especially in light of how opposed to the usage of the word trap she is. Fish and trap have the same meaning, they're just used by different communities. I think she likes drag because it offers a very simple, broad brush stereotype of femininity, which fits into her general idea of what a woman should be. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you heard Contra describe femininity or womanhood in intellectual terms, instead of focusing solely on appearance and beauty? If anything, she seems to resent women in academia who don't wear makeup.
I think even grad students want to be beautiful. They just want to do it in that Becky kind of way where you scoff at anything glam or artificial. Most female grad students and professors I know don't wear makeup. To them, the idea of earnestly putting on press-on nails or false eyelashes is inconceivable. Like maybe on Halloween. Now, part of that is that women in male-dominated fields sometimes feel like they have to present more masculine to be taken seriously because of this prejudice that beautified femininity equals frivolous. But another part is clearly some kind of not like other girls weird flex, which okay, fine, whatever. I'm not gonna judge another woman for the way she copes with a society that pressures women to be beautiful while simultaneously belittling them for caring about it.
If you listen to Contra talk about femininity enough, you come to the conclusion that she views women as objects that exist for ornamental and sexual purposes. Her ideal woman seems to be the 20-year-old insta-thought she is currently trying to transform into. That lines up pretty well with the fact that the final straw which pushed Contra into transitioning was realizing she was going to age into the body of an old man and needed to transition if she was going to have any hope of having a fulfilling sex life. This is also a good time to mention that the reason Contra wants to get a neo-vag is so she can have sex with guys.
But unfashionable though it is, I do think I want the surgery because, well, guys, can I confess something kind of dark to you? I have this really fucked up fetish where I want a boy to put his penis in my vagina. Crazy, right?
Maybe she has given other reasons somewhere else. She does take down a lot of her old content, but this is the only explanation I've seen. It's strange because she has said on many occasions that she doesn't have particularly strong genital dysphoria.
Plus, I'm pretty indifferent on the issue of breasts and genitals, and indifference is not enough to justify surgery.
But she's thinking about jumping into bottom surgery just to get piped down. What happens when she goes through all of the pain and complications of gender reassignment just to get filled up, but it doesn't fill the hole in her heart. What if something goes wrong? There's no shortage of trans women on YouTube telling their stories of bottom surgery complications. As Blair White said, transitioning is faulty. It's not something you should take lightly or rush into. And this is where Contra's cult members will probably say that she isn't serious about getting bottom surgery just so she can have hetero sex. She's just joking. It's self-deprecating humor. Therein lies the problem. Contra's videos are designed so that she can never really be pinned down at any point. In one video, she'll mock the idea of pseudo-bisexuality and Blanchard's transsexual typology by joking that she only wants to have sex with men because it makes her feel like a woman.
Pseudo-bisexual, because of course all trans women's experiences are lies, and because according to Blanchard, I only like guys because being filled up with their dicks makes me feel like a girl, which is what I'm really into.
In another video, she'll seriously mention that she wants to have a vaginoplasty so she can have sex with men.
I want a boy to put his penis in my vagina.
And in her drunken streams, she talks about watching cis porn and fantasizing about, well, you can imagine.
You know, it would be good. I want a vagina. Like, here's the interesting thing about vaginas. Like, if you have a vagina, like, someone can fuck you in your vagina. How awesome is that?
Oh, I think about that all the fucking time.
Yeah.
This is gonna sound super autogynephilic, but it's my number one, like, sexual fantasy is to, like, just have traditional missionary sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Autogynephilia confirmed.
Autogynephilic narcissist.
Male narcissist exposed.
How dare you want to have sex with your vagina, you freak.
Yeah. Yeah, right? And the idea of, like, losing my virginity again, or, like, for the first time, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god.
That's super hot.
With, like, the right person, with, like...
Yeah.
Oh my god. That sounds so wonderful.
Fuck, yeah.
She criticized Jordan Peterson for using a rhetorical style that prevents him from being pinned down, but Contra is arguably just as bad. I think she is a pretty talented comedy writer, and a really good video editor. But all the stylish editing, the characters, the garish costumes, wigs, and neon lighting are nothing more than distractions. Otherwise you'd realize you're on a theme park ride, held together by run-on sentences, questionable research, and statements that frequently contradict themselves from video to video.
As for brains, there is some evidence suggesting a correlation between binary transgender identity and cross-sex brain anatomy, but the evidence really doesn't justify claims about female brains and male bodies or anything like that. Brain differences between men and women are statistical averages of things like gray and white matter density, not, as the term female brain implies, distinct anatomical structures like penises and vaginas. You invented beauty, perfect angel, choke me, mommy. Every time I get a comment like that, I'm perfectly aware that it's wild exaggeration fueled by parasocial delusions, but I still get a hit of dopamine in my biologically female brain.
Personally, I think this is why she has been focusing more heavily on trans and other LGBTQ+ themed content. It doesn't require her to do as much research as other topics, because she can mostly talk about her own experiences. This, in turn, makes her videos far less prone to being debunked, unless you're an autist like myself, who will comb through her videos looking for contradictions. But the changes to Contra's channel in the last 2 years are just part of a larger continuum that dates back to her earliest days on YouTube. She started off by making videos about atheism or religion when they were trendy, but never found the success of her hero, The Amazing Atheist. When she returned to YouTube in 2016, she created content that was unique, funny, and actually subversive.
Today I want to discuss the Jewish question, the ethnic question, the
Wait,
alt-right,
what? The Jewish question? Hold on.
I thought to make this video.
What have you done to me? You're a goddamn fascist.
Contra's style at the time had a much different feel than your typical ownage videos from either the left or the right. They were just fun, and I think this is why the channel managed to attract quite a few fans who wouldn't usually watch left-wing content. However, this style didn't cause her channel to grow that much. It was only when she began making more SJW and trans-focused content that her channel started to blow up. The change in subject matter coincided with a change in creative direction. The easiest way to see how this change occurred is through the evolution of Contra's use of skits. Most skits in early videos were very campy, but they were also relatively short and didn't get in the way of the content itself.
You're a beautiful brown bear, Barry. A big, beautiful brown bear. Where I come from, things happen to bears like you, Barry. Bad things. Real bad things.
As time went by, She succumbed to nostalgia critic syndrome. Skits became longer, costumes more ridiculous, and her videos, which were normally in the 15-minute range, bloated into 30 to 45-minute self-indulgent fever dreams. Now we find ourselves in the position where every ContraPoints video has 4 skits, all of which are lit like the Neon Demon, and her costumes are becoming so absurd that she looks like Diamant de Galas fell into a dumpster behind the set of RuPaul's Drag Race. More to the point, the skits have changed from humorous interludes into drag puppet shows where Contra indulges her narcissism by talking to herself for half an hour. Natalie does this for a specific reason, though. During her time as a canvasser for the Democratic Party, Contra learned the value of stories over facts. It's easy to see her applying this concept to her channel over time. It's a clever trick, especially because it allows her to argue against a construct of her own making, rather than a specific person or statement. I can't think of a better example of this than Contra's years-long multiple video spanning obsession with Blair White. I know Contra's fans will tell me that she doesn't make videos about Blair White, but if you know the history between Contra and Blair, you will quickly recognize the moments when she's doing little more than trotting out a thinly veiled cardboard cutout of Blair to argue against. The story of Natalie's obsession with Blair is a bit convoluted, but as far as I know, it began in May of 2016 with her video, What Makes a Trans Chick Cool? This video was a commentary on an interview Blair did with Bearing. There were some funny moments, but at this point Contra was still working out the kinks, so to say.
Now that I've been enlightened by Blair and Bearing, maybe the next time I see a trans person I'll say, "Hey, tits, when did you get your pecker snipped?" And then if she gets mad I'll say, "Can't you take a joke, you SJW bitch? Get back in your safe space."
Contra went on to criticize Blair on Twitter until things escalated a bit in April of 2017, when Contra and Blair engaged in a live stream debate with Shoe on Head as the moderator. It went pretty poorly. Part of this is because Blair and Contra are a bad pairing for a debate. Blair is like one of those really aggressive chihuahuas. She's a bully and can be extremely obnoxious. On the other hand, Contra is pretty meek and doesn't have anything resembling a personality in real life. This is probably why she leans so heavily on writing characters and ripping off the vibrant nature of drag culture in her videos. Like most YouTube debates, this one instantly devolved into quibbling over semantic definitions and went nowhere. Strangely though, this one debate seems to have lodged itself into Contra's mind and grown very deep roots. It was still stuck in her head a year and a half later when she made The Aesthetic, and referenced the debate to show that trans women are more accepted when they are more archetypally and performatively feminine.
Ow. Do you remember that debate between Blair White and that YouTuber with the pink wig? What was her name? I don't know. She was relevant back in 2017. Anyway, this was before she transitioned. And in that debate, Blair looked like she had 2 X chromosomes, and the other one looked like this awkward dude in an anime wig not looking at the camera. I vaguely remember. I think I wrote an angry blog post about it. Well, the pink wig lost that debate so bad. It was embarrassing to watch. Not really. I mean, she was right, and her arguments were better. Tabby. Sweetie, honey, angel, darling, princess, baby. Arguments don't matter. How pretty you are matters.
The implication being that Contra brought better arguments to the debate, but people viewed Blair as the winner because she was more passable, and Contra was still in her genderqueer phase. The debate left such a lasting impact on Natalie that she has made several videos where the themes and characters were reminiscent of the way Blair behaved and the points she raised during the debate. The most transparent example being her Tiffany Tumbles video. The basic premise of this video, being a Rubin Report type of show, featuring a debate between Tiffany Tumbles, a trans activist who places importance on passing and being seen by society as stereotypically female as a way to gain acceptance, and her counterpart, Adria, a butch lesbian trans activist who doesn't feel the need to conform to society's notions of femininity. Yeah, Contra doesn't really have a very diverse cast of characters. And the framing device for this puppet show is the question of, are traps gay? We'll talk about this a little bit later. In Contra's defense, she has stated that Tiffany Tumbles isn't based on Blair White. That being said, it is painfully obvious that the character was intended to be Blair White. The arguments that Tiffany Tumbles makes in this video are barely cloaked versions of things Blair said in their debate.
You gain acceptance by building bridges, not by saying, these are my terms, abide by them, or you're a fucking bigot. That's not how it works, okay? And I think the amount of people who comment on my channel saying, I'm not trying to big myself up, but I have a lot of people who comment on my channel saying that their only perception of trans people was the Riley Dennises, was the Milo Stewarts, was the Dakota Hendrixes. And they had a horrible fucking perception of them.
What trans people need right now is people like you to keep a low profile and people like me to be our representatives. Because I act like a normal woman and I date normal men and I don't have a cat girl girlfriend with a girl dick. Ugh! This hun. People are gonna see this and they're gonna think this is what trans people are. You should not be representing us. They're nothing like me. I'm nothing like them.
The biggest clue for me that Tiffany was intended to be Blair is the way she repeatedly mentions that she isn't a victim.
Even though I'm trans, I refuse to be a victim. I'm not a victim. I'm not a victim. I am in complete control.
This goes all the way back to the video Contra made about Blair in 2016.
I'm glad that Blair doesn't face much discrimination for being trans, but I kind of suspect that part of what Bearing finds cool about Blair is that she isn't a victim. Blair has said in other videos that she's trying to get away from the victim mentality.
The farther I get into my transition, the farther I stray away from that victim mentality.
And I think this is an understandable urge. I don't like thinking about myself as a victim either. I like to think that I'm strong and beautiful and nubile and in control of every situation, except when I choose not to be. But it's a lot easier to get away from the victim mentality when you're not a victim.
With the understanding that Tiffany tumbles as Blair, the ending sequence is just Contra fantasizing that Blair is a miserable person with internalized transphobia who hates herself.
Who could ever love this? I'm just mutilating myself. It's so disgusting.
Lest you think Contra is above this kind of petty and bizarre fantasizing, I'll mention that she considers TERFs to be synonymous with cis lesbians, and the headcanon she has for her main TERF character, Abigail Cockbane, is that Abigail is actually straight, but secretly resents her heterosexuality. And boy is there a lot to unpack with that sentence, because I realized a lot of you probably don't know what TERFs are. In the most simplistic terms, a TERF is a radical feminist who doesn't view trans women as women, and doesn't think they should be included in female spaces. TERFs have become a bit of a boogie woman for members of the online transgender social justice echo chamber, who view TERFs as some kind of imminent threat to trans women. This is in spite of the fact that most TERFs tend to be pretty hysterical.
So let's break this down. So cisgender apparently is what we call women these days. Apparently that's what I am is cisgendered, not woman, life-giving, creatress, goddess, queen, sovereign being.
And there really aren't that many. I mean, seriously, the gender-critical subreddit, the hive of scum and villainy that serves as the existential threat for extremely online trans women, only has about 1,000 more subscribers than ContraPoints subreddit alone. I think a lot of people understand how rare true TERFs are, which is why the term is basically used as a slur against any woman who speaks out in any way against trans women. Typically, the target is a cis lesbian who had the audacity to say she isn't interested in having sex with a woman who has a penis. Doesn't matter if you think trans women are women, and that it's possible for lesbians to be attracted to trans women who present as female. It doesn't even matter if you think it's possible for a lesbian to want to have sex with post-op trans women. If you're not into girl dick, you're a transphobe or a TERF, which is where we circle back around to Tiffany Tumbles. Look, I warned you this would be convoluted. As I said earlier, the framing device for the Tiffany Tumbles video was a Rubin Report ripoff, where two trans women discuss the topic of are traps gay? You may not think that a fictional debate about whether traps are gay or not is actually about lesbians, but that is where some really slick goalpost shifting comes into play. Contra conflates traps with trans women, then just changes the question to, is it gay to be attracted to trans women?
I need to interrupt this exchange of ideas because I feel like we're just getting hung up on terminology. Look, Adria, if you don't like the word trap, we just won't use the word trap. The real question is it gay to be attracted to trans women?
Then the Adria character, who identifies as a trans lesbian dating other trans women, waxes poetic about the feminine penis.
and it has a different mouthfeel. Ugh. Can we please talk about the mouthfeel? Why is no one talking about the mouthfeel?
So in a few simple steps, Contra has effectively changed the conversation from "Are traps gay?" to "Why don't you appreciate the mouthfeel of my girl dick, fellow lesbian?" Here's where things get really interesting in my opinion. Over time, Contra has become increasingly open about her sexual interest in men. Because the ContraPoints channel is a thinly veiled excuse to talk about her sex life, there was now an opportunity to tackle the "Are traps gay?" topic from another angle. This video is a great example about what I was talking about earlier when I said Contra's videos have become increasingly self-indulgent. Contra says virtually nothing different in this video than she did during the segment from Tiffany Tumbles. Shit, she basically says the same thing as Count Dankula, but her video is 10 times longer if you include the footage she used from Dankula's own video on the subject. She even does the same goalpost shifting from Tiffany Tumbles, where she redefines trap as trans woman.
I'm gonna stop saying trap now because it's not a good word, as has been explained. In fact, it's really best to treat it like a slur. So what we're really asking here is if a man is attracted to or has sex with a trans woman, is that gay?
I don't know anything about that weeb shit you weird boys watch with your Rip Van Winkles and your Black Butlers, but my impression was that traps are generally feminine-looking cross-dressers. But, for the sake of brevity, I'll concede that trap does sometimes encompass trans women. The point is, Contra wasn't altruistically making the video about traps so that confused young white men would see a trans woman talking about traps instead of Richard Spencer or whatever. She's just capitalizing on a meme to get more views. The crux of the video is if it's gay for a man to have sex with a trans woman.
Now here's a question I get a lot. I'm gonna assume it's from a man. Am I gay for jerking off to your videos? Well, yes. You're gay now. That's how it works, Mary. It's kind of like Teen Wolf, only you're slowly gonna turn into Rip Taylor. So, I guess I'll see you at Pride, homo.
Personally, I don't think it's gay if you're attracted to a trans woman who presents as female. Where I'm not convinced is the idea that you can be straight and also be attracted to a trans woman's penis. I don't care what Contra says about mouthfeel. I don't think it's that big of a deal if you only did it once or twice, though.
You ain't gay. You ain't gay. If you said once, you ain't gay. Where's your wigs? Where's your gowns?
Contra does make the point that sexuality is complicated, but only uses it as an excuse to mention that she used to get chatted up by straight guys when she was still a crossdresser. The complexity of human sexuality is a really interesting topic for a video, certainly more interesting than a second, self-indulgent debate about a dead meme, which is itself little more than window dressing while Contra bloviates about the time a guy went down on her.
Can you feel like a woman while your dick is being sucked? The answer is yes. It was so hot. I loved it, he loved it, and just knowing that he'd never done that before, but I was just so special. 10 out of 10.
Which is why I can't take anyone seriously if they think of Contra as a genuine philosopher or intellectual. Her videos only exist to feed Contra's ego, because she is a pseudo-intellectual narcissist who craves validation and attention. That was the reason she started making YouTube videos back in the atheism days. If you remember her antics as Nicotine 2, you know that Contra loved being shocking. She was involved in that idiotic Crackergate controversy where a bunch of atheists, including Contra's ex, Ghost of Day, ironically took communion at a Catholic church. Her love of attention was the reason she returned to YouTube and built a persona off of going after the alt-right and de-radicalizing young white men. And she loved the attention it brought her for a while. Until, as she said in the comments on Cat Black's recent video, she realized all the journalists want to talk to her about is de-radicalizing the alt-right. Turns out, Contra was just being used as a prop in a bigger ideological game, and she is not used to being used. When you look at her pattern of behavior over the years, it becomes apparent that Contra is only interested in things that bring her money, attention, or influence. This is the irony of ContraPoints. She really is that college-educated, bourgeois, alcoholic decadent she jokes about being in her videos. That is why she hides her old videos, in my opinion. Not because of dysphoria, or because people might dig up a nugget of dirt. Because she hasn't grown. She is still making the same content where a privileged upper-middle-class white person who almost completed a PhD lectures the peons about everything they're doing wrong. Every so often, she'll throw in the disclaimer that she grew up as a privileged white kid who got to study philosophy, so she doesn't understand what less privileged people experience. But what does she do with that? She doesn't care about anyone unless she can use them in some way. That is why when her channel was growing in 2016 and 2017, she was willing to debate Surgan or pretend to be friends with Shoe on Head. She used them to boost her profile and gain new fans. That ended up backfiring on Contra a few times, as her increasingly social justice-oriented audience grew tired of Natalie associating with anyone on the right. Contra's fans are the kind of far leftists that believe you shouldn't give conservatives any kind of platform to express their opinions. So, when in late 2017, Contra announced she would be doing a live debate with Blair White and Theron Meyer, there was a massive shitstorm. But this wasn't just about the debate. The comments on Twitter and Reddit make it pretty clear that fans were turning on Contra to teach her a lesson. She was too friendly with people like Shoe on Head and Armored Skeptic. She was interacting with the right too much, and Contra's fans were going to correct her or destroy her. After days of cannibalizing attacks from her political circle and her own fans, Contra was left crying in bed and questioning whether she had the fortitude to be a public figure. So forgive me if I think the idea of Contra de-radicalizing anyone is ridiculous. All she has done is create a cult that is so radical that it tried to destroy her. But more importantly, I think it shows where Contra's true values lie. By capitulating to the extremists in her fan base, she showed that she is more interested in popularity and money than having principles. During the research process for this video, I've seen a lot of people gleefully hoping that eventually Contra is going to say or do something that pisses off her SJW fans and they will finally cancel her. I mean, it's not like some of them aren't trying. I don't think a week goes by without Contra drunkenly tweeting something that causes a few of her fans to pull out their pitchforks. However, if there was any time where Contra could have been cancelled, it would have been in 2017, though. Her fan base is too sycophantic to turn on her for a run-of-the-mill Twitter po-fa, and Contra is too cucked to do anything particularly controversial. I don't think any video from a conservative channel would stand a real chance of damaging Contra's brand either, because her fans will put it on the pay no mind list immediately. Addressing down from another member of BreadTube would be the only possibility, but I doubt any of them would go after Natalie. For one thing, they would probably lose a huge amount of subs, because Contra is the biggest BreadTuber, and her fans have a parasocial love affair with her. Contra also funds several of the other BreadTubers on Patreon, so they would probably be losing a nice chunk of change every month. But perhaps the biggest reason none of them would go after Natalie is because all of these people are pretty exceptional. If one of them went into business for themselves, the mutually assured destruction pact they all have would fall apart. All of the dirt that remains locked away and unspoken of on Kiwi Farms would find its way back to the surface, as every other member of that circle joined the dog pile. Unless they put together a fucking flawless case, the YouTube career would be left in tatters. At this point, the only thing that could possibly bring Contra down is if somebody still had one of her old blog TV videos. I've heard some rumors that they still exist, and from what I understand, a few of them would be pretty damaging if they resurfaced. If I had to guess, I imagine the thought of those videos probably keeps Contra up at night. Or maybe something related to Northwestern. I wonder if anything controversial happened right around the time Contra left academia. Who knows. To be honest, I don't think Contra will be cancelled anytime soon. From my perspective, that is the scarier of the two scenarios, because I think Contra is headed for a full-on meltdown sometime in the future. The story of the content creator with a cult-like fan base is a tale as old as the internet. The fans inevitably push the creator further and further into isolation and delusions of grandeur. For Contra, this is especially dangerous because she is constantly being love-bombed by hundreds of thousands of people. But, by her own account, she is in a doom spiral. Where do you think this will go as she becomes more powerful, makes more money, and is showered with even more love and attention, especially for somebody who admitted self-harming tendencies, who scours the internet reading negative posts about herself? The same person has been diagnosed with half a dozen mental illnesses over a 20-year period, none of which are being treated anymore. She's still self-medicating with alcohol and hormones she got from an informed consent clinic. She spends so much time altering her appearance with apps like Facetune that she is disassociating with her own face, and she has already gone under the knife, which she admits did make her feel better. In fact, her dysphoria is getting worse, and she's becoming more obsessed with her appearance over time.
I'm a professional YouTube influencer, forgive me, Father, and I'm on camera all the time. I edit my own videos, so I spend upwards of 60 hours a month staring at my own face on a screen. Now you try doing that and see what kind of fucked up complex you develop.
Now realize that for the time being, Her income is only going to increase, and she's going to attract more and more people who will enable her. Whatever happens, I have a feeling it won't be pretty. For me, the most enjoyable and challenging thing about making videos is trying to find the most compelling narrative of the topic I'm discussing. I really like uncovering the themes and threads of a story, and then turning it all into something coherent. That was very difficult with this video. There was so much I couldn't include. There are so many facts that I would have liked to use in my video. Facts that are well known, that were documented at one point. Maybe they have even been archived somewhere, but I don't have access to those copies. I have a very hard time reporting on something if I haven't actually seen it or heard it, even if many others have confirmed its existence. That is the beauty of scrubbing your old material from the internet. It doesn't matter how many people agree that it happened, there will always be doubt. Is it wrong? I don't know. As I said in the beginning of the video, it's understandable to want to delete the embarrassing things you've done in the past. On the other hand, there is a fine line between deleting cringy content from your past and destroying evidence that would rightfully change the way people perceive you. The plan might work short term, but people are going to get curious. They'll start to wonder who Natalie Wynn was before she magically popped out of the ether in 2016. And they will wind up on places like Kiwi Farms or 4chan. Contra has done a decent job of scrubbing her past from the internet, but it wasn't perfect. There is still a fair amount floating around on the web, and you never know who has what on an old hard drive. It's really only a matter of time before something resurfaces. As always, I want to thank you for watching the video, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing. This video took longer than I would have liked, but there were a lot of distractions. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you would like to see more of my videos, I suggest checking out my series about disgraced shock jock Anthony Cumia's battle with the Opie and Anthony subreddit. And if you'd like to support my channel, check out my Twitter and Patreon, which will be linked in the description. Finally, a special thanks to my supporters on Patreon. Thank you, Jack, Bone CK, Wrestling Soup, James Taylor, Yuko, Kevin Howard, Danny, Thomas Drahi, and Jackie.